Thanks for checking in on the State of Basketball Podcast, episode 49. I'm Adam Miller, and I'm here with Jaren Will each and every week, and we are going to be bringing you the news and notes on all 11 Division I schools in the state of Indiana, because in 49 states,
it's just basketball.
And we're here, episode 49. If you've listened to our last couple episodes, we appreciate you checking in on the schools that we've covered so far. If you haven't listened to those are Ball State, Butler, and Evansville. So if you want to check those out, you want to know what any of those teams are doing, we would love for you to listen to those. Just scroll down in your feed, or
honestly, you can just go to our YouTube channel, and under the playlists tab, there's a playlist for our 24-25 season previews. So we like to make it as easy as possible for you to find, and then, that way at the end of the season, you can go back and compare what we said to the actual outcomes of the teams to make it nice and easy for you to congratulate us on all of our spot-on takes.
Yeah, it was between making the playlist or just pushing it out to everybody's iPhone like you two did with that album that one time. So we opted to do the less intrusive one,
Yeah.
But that's for now. For now, we'll see if we stick to that. But we're just going to be previewing Indiana this week. So we are talking about the Hoosiers. Not going to go over the format every single time, but we're just going to talk about kind of real briefly what they did last year, what they're projected to do this upcoming season, new pieces, key games, and then kind of what we think the Hoosiers will do this year. So we're excited about the Hoosiers this year, and as we are all these teams, but we got Indiana on our wall. So
I think of the three teams we've covered prior to this, where obviously we're very high on Butler and Ball State. Mm-hmm. But I think so far this has been the team that we are most looking forward to seeing how the season pans out.
Yeah.
At least thus far. Obviously, there's several other schools that we still have yet to cover. A majority of the schools, actually. But we are very, very high on the Hoosiers this season.
Yeah, there's some interesting wrinkles to the season that could pan out a couple different ways. And, I mean, this is a team, and we'll get into it, but, this is a team that has a lot of unknowns, and we're in an age of college basketball where those could go really well, or you could not gel and your season sucks. So, I mean, both are on the table.
Both are very much on the table.
Yeah. So, maybe we're on that side. Maybe we're on the positive side. We'll see. We'll get into it.
You'll find out in about 20 minutes.
Yeah. So, Jaren, let's talk about where the Hoosiers finished last year. We're talking Torvik rankings.
Yep.
So let's talk about where they finished last year.
Yeah, so last year in the rankings they finished 83rd, which I had to double check that because we used KenPom all last season where they were fringe 100.
Yeah.
And I saw 83. I was like, "Oh, okay." And I mean, in my head, I'm all in on Torvik now because they thought more highly of the Hoosiers than KenPom.
To be fair, they finished 91st in KenPom last year.
Okay. I thought it was 97.
Pretty close. I mean,
okay,
it was close till the end there.
KenPom Roy, I apologize.
And
I was
he'd
not
just
familiar
say,
with your game.
what? It's all an algorithm. Hate the algorithm. You get mad when
he
you
wrote the algorithm though.
That's fair.
So finished 83rd in the Torvik rankings. That is as a result of their 19-14 overall record, where they were 10-10 in the Big Ten. So finished dead even in conference play.
10s.
It is a lot of tens. It's two 10s.
3, 10-10 in the Big Ten.
Oh, I see what you. Okay. Okay.
Big 18 this next season.
Big 18, which we'll kind of get into that, but they did finish that 10-10 record. Did put them at 8th out of 14 in the Big Ten, which I thought they finished 6th. So that might be a typo on my part. I was typing with one hand earlier when I typed this up. But they did have a quarterfinal loss to Nebraska in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, and if you're an Indiana fan, you'll remember that was not just a loss, but it was almost a 30-point loss. So
yeah, that was the Keisei Tominaga. I'm gonna make it to the league. Game.
One of many of those.
That's valid.
Yeah,
that's valid.
Finished 8th in the Big Ten. Not great for Mike Woodson's year 3 after making it to the tournament his first 2 years. They did a lot this offseason. Made a lot of moves, and it was a little bit, I mean, we'll get into it. It was a little bit dicey for a second there because they had one commit in the class of 2024, Liam McNeely. For whatever reason that, we aren't the coaching staff, we're not privy to that information. He decommits.
Yep.
Ends up going to UConn. So then Indiana has no recruits and, kind of looked scary for a minute, was laughable by Purdue fans. The internet was talking. But then they kind of turned things around this offseason and kind of made waves in a different way than with the way that I think that the Hoosiers thought that the offseason and the recruiting class was going to go. So let's talk about this upcoming season. We're going to Torvik. I mean, he had the Hoosiers higher at the end of last year. I don't know. Ken Pom doesn't have his preseason rankings out, so can't say definitively where he has them. But let's talk about where Torvik has them this upcoming season.
30. Torvik has the Hoosiers as the number 30 team in the country, which is, a lot of the folks, the analysts that put out preseason way too early top 25s, several people had the Hoosiers ranked top 25. So I think 30 is a pretty realistic place for them to start the season.
I mean, I mean, you're looking at the difference of an algorithm versus like a human, the eye test.
Yeah.
But I mean, like 30 is pretty good spot to be. You're looking at like a 5-6 seed if you're like the 30th best team in the country.
6.8 is what Torvik has them as their projected seed line.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely an improvement for 83rd.
Yes.
For maybe 83rd.
Yes. For sure. Their projected record, though, so 19-10 overall, with an 11-9 record in the Big Ten. That if you go to Torvik and look at the Big Ten standings, that will look like they're in 6th, but in reality, they are technically tied for 2nd in the conference. There's, the standings themselves on Torvik's site is based on the preseason kind of projected ranking. So,
yeah,
of that of them being ranked 30, there are 5 Big Ten teams ranked higher than 30.
Torvik's rankings.
In Torvik's
overall,
rankings. But there's, several teams tied for first with the same conference record, several teams tied for second. Obviously, tiebreakers would go into effect, and we don't mean it based on the projections. You can't really determine what a tiebreaker looks like because, again, it's all metrics based.
It's head-to-heads versus, head-to-heads and then who they played. The thing to note, though, having them 6th, being the they're the 6th highest ranked team in the Big Ten, but tied for 2nd with an 11-9 record. Tied for 1st is also 3 teams with a 12-8 record. So it's 1 game between 1st and 2nd.
Yep.
And the thing that I've noticed about Torvik, which Ken Pom I think doesn't do so much, and I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but like Ken Pom's preseason records. Remember we were talking last preseason, being like, wow, like the team who's projected to win this conference is supposed to go 17-3, and then it's like 4 through 9, all 1 game apart, and then the bottom was very different. So Ken Pom's projections in the conference are like a lot closer, I guess.
Torvik.
Torvik.
Yep.
Because like I don't see the winner of the Big Ten being 12-8. I think that the winner of the Big Ten probably is 15-5 or 14-6.
That's what I was kind of thinking the same thing.
So that's one thing to keep in mind too. So don't just look at that and be like, Indiana's ranked 6th and tied for 2nd in the Big Ten. It's never going to shake out that. If we come to the end of the season and there's a 3-way tie at 12-8 and a 3-way tie at 11-9, I don't know what I'll do, but I will be surprised.
Yeah. Another thing to note too is when I said that overall record of 19-10, you might be thinking, okay, will they play more than 29 games? Yes, correct. That is correct. Torvik does not take into consideration the battle for Atlantis, just because it's a tournament style MTE, and there's really no way of interpreting who wins the first game versus who wins the game of their opponent, and that just, I imagine, is a little too complex for.
You're missing a variable, so you can't.
Yeah, it's there's too many possible outcomes that it would take our good friend Bart way too long to try and figure that out, and nobody has time for that.
Yeah, so there'll be after the first game in the Battle for Atlantis, there will be a projection on who if they're gonna win or lose against the next game.
Yeah.
So before we get into kind of more about like the Battle for Atlantis, I want to talk about their returners, because they had two people, two of their starting five, I guess technically, leave. Khalil Ware goes to the NBA draft. I guess Xavier Johnson was technically a starter.
I consider him a
for
starter.
Half the season. He graduates. He's done with his 11 years of college. So they've got like three kind of key returners, and then they did lose quite a few pieces to the transfer portal, but they were role players and didn't really have a huge impact on Indiana last season. So the three big pieces coming back are Malik Renew, a 6'9" junior forward, Mackenzie Mbako, a 6'8" sophomore wing forward, we'll see, and then Trey Galloway, a 6'5" super senior guard. So
actually, I guess Trey would be like a super duper senior.
Yeah,
because super is typically, a fifth year. This will be Trey's sixth year.
Fifth. He didn't redshirt.
That's right.
This is just his COVID year.
That's right. So I guess it would be
You're super duper in our eyes.
Yeah,
Trey. You're super duper in our eyes.
So I guess he would still be considered a super senior. But
Let's
also, super senior is a kind of a negative term anyway.
Yeah.
For people who go 5 years that are.
He's taking a victory lap, man.
A victory lap for sure. No little foreshadowing.
So let's talk about him.
Yeah. So Malik, he's coming back. Started last season. Averaged 28.7 minutes per game, 15.4 points per game. I think that put him as their second leading scorer. 6 rebounds per game. Obviously, that's, I think, a little skewed when you have a guy like Khalil Ware, who pulls down every rebound known to human. And then Malik also had 2.7 assists per game. So played down low, was able to feed the ball out. I think, a little spoiler alert, I think that assist rate goes up a little bit because, reasons that we'll talk about here shortly. Mackenzie Mbako played 27 minutes per game as a freshman. That's huge for any freshman coming in. That's a lot of experience. He got a lot of run. Great developmental tool, kind of asset. 12 points per game, not 12 point per game. 12 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, and he also shot 32.7% from 3.
Yeah. Keep going.
Okay.
I'm just looking for something.
Okay. And then Trey, he played 33.3 minutes per game, so about 5 minutes more than Malik. 2.9 rebounds per game, 10.6 points per game, 4.6 assists per game. One thing that's kind of scary to look at when looking at Trey's stats from last year, he was 26% from 3. This is down 20% from the year before, where he shot 46% from 3. We talked about it a lot last year. I think a lot of that had to do with him playing a kind of a different role than he was used to the year before. He had to play a lot of, I don't want to say point guard, but he had to run the offense.
He was the lead guard, basically.
Yeah, he was the lead guard with Gabe Cupps being a freshman and helping facilitate.
Yeah, they both kind of shared the role of the one, and that's not where Trey belongs.
No, and I think that was a drastic kind of shift in what Trey's role is. Obviously, he stepped into it and he still had 10 points per game.
Do you remember the first time we ever saw Point Trey? Do you remember the game? I remember the game.
I mean, vaguely.
Because we had never seen it before. Like, we had never seen him bring the ball up, run the offense every possession until one game where he had to. He quite literally had to. Because there was no one else available.
Oh, that was the Illinois game?
No, you're in the right state, though.
Northwestern.
Yeah, it was Northwestern game whenever Christian
right.
Lander was hurt, Rob Fennessy was hurt, and then like
6 people had a 1 game suspension.
All the guards were suspended. Yes, and then we were like, because Trey had never played that role. He had always been like a three, maybe a 2, because he did not shoot well up until his junior year, and then we saw that, and it was like, okay, maybe Trey can play the point, and then I guess that's just what they've been able to rely on that. And
Mike Woodson saw it once. It was like, well, at least we got you in our back pocket if we ever need it. And last year they did need it because their starting point guard got hurt and couldn't play, unfortunately. And they didn't have quite the same. They didn't have Jalen Hood-Schifino like they did the year before. So it was definitely an out of position time for Trey last season. So I think 3-point shooting is what a lot of people are concerned about with the Hoosiers. So
not just with Trey specifically.
Yeah, not with Trey, but in general with the team. But I do think that looking at what he did the year before when he was playing more his role, I do think that his shooting percentages goes up.
Yeah, and we'll talk about kind of why when we get to this next section, because I think that the newcomers that they're bringing in are going to allow Trey to play
off ball
the way that he should be playing.
Yeah.
And that is the third lead guard, probably, right? The third option at point. So talk about the new guys they're bringing in, because they bring in a haul. It's a transfer haul.
They definitely 4 huge pieces. One of them
is literally huge.
Yeah, all of them are figuratively huge, but one is literally huge. You want to pull up his height for me, because I didn't write that down.
Yeah.
But Miles Rice, a transfer from Washington State,
6'3", Miles Rice.
Yep, 6'3" transfer from Washington State. He's a redshirt sophomore. His true freshman year, he sat out because he was battling cancer. So came back last year, and is definitely a much-needed point guard one for the Hoosiers. He was the best Pac-12 freshman last season. I didn't write down all of his accolades, but he won, I think, Freshman of the Year, All-Conference, Freshman First Team. A stud for a redshirt freshman, especially playing a year after, battling cancer. He averaged 14.8 points per game, 3.1 rebounds, 3.8 assists, and just under 2 steals per game on 44% shooting from the field, 27.5% shooting from 3, and then an 81% free throw shooter. So, again, lower percentage and 3 points, 3-point percentage. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit more here later. But then they also picked up Kenan Carlisle, who was a transfer from Stanford. He's a sophomore. He's a guard, and he is how tall?
Oh, sorry, flipped off the tab. He is 6'3" as well.
All right, 2 6'3" guards, compared to Trey, who was 6'5", playing guard. Kind of big for a guard.
Almost a 3, you would say.
Almost like he should be playing the 3. He was also a top-performing freshman in the Pac-12 last season. I believe he made honorable mention all freshmen. So
I'll fact check you, but go ahead.
Positive signs there from his true freshman year. He averaged 11.5 points, 2.7 boards, and 2.7 assists per game. And then another big, probably the biggest piece that they brought in, Umar Ballo.
7 foot.
Who is 7 foot and also strong as can be.
Yeah.
So he is a transfer from Arizona. He is a redshirt senior plus. So he is a super duper senior.
He's a super duper senior.
He was all Pac-12 freshman year. or first team. Wow, all Pac-12 first team. Words are very hard. Last year, yes. 12.9 points per game, 10.1 rebounds, 1.3 blocks per game. He was also one of 6 major conference players to average a double-double. Fun fact.
Nice. Here's a free throw for you. How many people? I mean, it can't be this year because the Pac-12 no longer exists for now. How many players were on the Pac-12 first team?
7.
10 every year. 10 people.
Interesting.
I don't know how they think that 10 people makes a like
why not
a first team. That is 5. Like every other conference in America does it. So
interesting. That's not to discredit Umar Ballo.
Yeah, I mean Miles Rice also on that list, first team, one of 10, and then honorable mention.
Well, Carlisle was honorable mention. All freshmen. Yeah.
Yes, honorable mention Carlisle, and then honorable mention all freshman team Miles Rice, and I think freshman of the year.
He was freshman of the year.
Yeah. Okay.
And then another major transfer that's not from the Pac-12 this time.
Yeah, they stopped. they robbed the Pac-12 blind and then moved on to somewhere else.
Yep. Luke Goody is a transfer from Illinois. He's a senior forward. He averaged last season 5.7 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 1.6 made 3-pointers, and the 20.2 minutes per game that he played last season. So,
and a guy that might get another year.
Could potentially get another year.
I think he's definitely going to try.
Yeah. He was hurt
his freshman year,
like
and a foot injury, and only played 10 games.
7 or 10 games, yeah. But he did shoot 39.9% from the 3-point line. So they picked up a shooter. They picked up a guy who
is definitively a shooter.
Yeah.
And an older guy. So those two things.
And if you look at his averaged 1.6 made 3-pointers, averaged 5.7 points. So my math isn't great. We've established this throughout the first 48 episodes that we've done. His points coming from the 3-point line.
Yes,
is really what that tells me.
Yes.
And then they picked up a freshman late in the recruitment cycle, Bryson Tucker, who, in my opinion, not talked about enough. I think he is probably one of the more underrated pieces of this team. Because
just funny to say because he's a 5-star recruit.
Right. But he's just not getting talked about. And I foresee that we will talk about him quite a bit throughout the season because some people say that he could get drafted after his freshman year.
That'd be crazy. Some
people are saying that he could end up being their best player. He is just an absolute baller. Super long wing. I think he's like 6'8", maybe, or 6'7", but wingspan that's like 7 foot, something crazy. But huge pickup. All 5 of those pickups are huge, and I believe they picked up a few other transfers.
Yeah, they brought a couple back up, some maybe practice players, deep bench players, but
But those are the key newcomers that the Hoosiers have to look out for.
Yeah, and they brought in they brought in like an experienced backup center, but I don't expect him to play much backup center because we talked about this when we were on Often Daunted.
Often Daunted podcast.
Talking about how Umar Ballo does not play a ton of minutes, but I expect they'll slide Malik Renew down to the 5 whenever he comes out, and that gives them a more versatile lineup.
And I believe on John Rothstein's podcast, Mike Whitson also said that.
He said he wanted to see Mac at the 5 a lot, or at the 4 a lot. It should be a different look for the Hoosiers. I think that Carlisle and Rice can both shoot. Their percentages weren't great, but I think that they'll be in a better position to shoot better this year with better pieces around them.
Yeah, I mean, Stanford wasn't great. Washington State was a good team.
Right, but they
built pieces around those two.
And he also was coming off of cancer.
Yeah.
And coming off of cancer and then playing 30-plus games of basketball, your legs are going to go out.
Yep.
So, we're getting long here, so let's talk about their key games. Not many. Not many.
You're right.
This will be a short segment.
What games do they have to look out for this year?
Well, they have a charity exhibition at Tennessee, which is cool. That's on October 27th. And then literally the only notable games in their non-conference are the Battle for Atlantis.
Yep.
That's it. Everything other, they play home against South Carolina, but like South Carolina probably won't make the tournament. So not a big deal. If they were going to South Carolina, it'd be probably worth mentioning. But they start off Battle for Atlantis playing Louisville. No one knows what they're going to be. Pat Kelsey just took over.
First season under Pat Kelsey.
Yeah.
He did a lot of work in the transfer portal, but still, you just don't know. Obviously,
Right.
if you have
And
heard
he's
of
a great
college,
coach.
you've heard of College of Charleston. You've heard of Pat Kelsey,
Yeah.
because he was their coach for the last few seasons where they just didn't lose games.
Yeah.
ever.
The great mid-major. So
Yep.
it could be dangerous, but also you don't know. And then based on win or lose on their side, they could play West Virginia, gonna suck, or Gonzaga. So you obviously want Gonzaga.
For a
And
resume standpoint, yep.
And Gonzaga's not going to lose West Virginia. So then you're probably going to play Gonzaga. And then you could play Davidson. Don't want them. Don't want Providence. Don't want Oklahoma. But you want Arizona. Arizona's probably going to come through that side of the bracket. So
Yep.
hopefully Louisville, Gonzaga, Arizona. So those are notable. You got to win them all.
Yeah.
Like you got to win them all because your non-conference does you no favors.
Yeah,
You just got to win them all.
Yeah, it's like Pokemon, but
Yeah.
not catching them, winning them.
Yeah. Big Ten schedule. They open up Big Ten play against Minnesota. I think that's at home, and
Yep.
then they go to Nebraska right at after
Yeah.
the other December game. They go to Washington. They go to Oregon. So they do the Pacific Northwest trip. They don't have to go out to the LA schools, and their last games at Ohio State or home against Ohio State.
Home against
that's
Ohio
good.
State.
So they get senior day at home. But what should we expect the Hoosiers to do? What
are their goals?
What is at the end of the season when we do our recap, we'll say their season was successful because they at least did what?
Win the Big Ten tournament.
For the first time ever.
Yep.
Lofty goals.
Yep. Win the Big
Okay.
Ten tournament, and then make the NCAA tournament. I think, and the reason I put that as a success is because they didn't make the tournament last year, and that caused a lot of strife for a lot of fans, a lot of media folks.
Mm-hmm.
That I think you can't continue to digress. You have to keep moving in a positive direction. And for the Hoosiers, making the tournament is that positive direction.
I think that's bare minimum.
Right.
Bare minimum.
Bare minimum, make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Ideally, you're playing Sweet 16.
Yeah.
Or
making a second weekend or at least a top 4 seed, right?
Yep.
Where you're wearing homes.
Yep. Before we get into our record prediction.
Before we get into that, just Big Ten tournament or Big Ten regular season, either one of those.
I think either one.
Okay, just
But-
win some sort of Big Ten title.
Yeah, correct.
Shared or outright or the tournament.
Correct. You
I
need to
agree.
have a Big Ten related trophy in the case.
Yeah, and
at
if
the
you're
end of the
doing
season.
that, you're going to be top 3 seed.
Yeah, easy.
I think.
Easy. One thing to note, we'll talk about our record prediction here in a moment, but one thing to note, this is an important year for Mike Whitchin, right? This is the first time in his tenure with the Hoosiers, it's his 4th year, where he's finally put together a roster and a team that wants to play, or that fits
the way
the style of play and his coaching style. He came in saying he wants to play a 4 out, 1 in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have that. We saw that spark with Malik being able to shoot 3-pointers last year. We've talked about Malik playing down low at the 5 and having Mac play at the 4.
Yeah.
So really important season for Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers. And then 3-point shooting, we've talked about it a couple times. That is it has continued to be a concern, specifically of the talking heads, so of the major media personalities within basketball.
And Indiana fans.
And
anyone
Indiana
in the
and
state.
Indiana fans of the Hoosiers.
And enemies of the Hoosiers.
That's you're not wrong. But I believe, personally, I think Adam is with me that this concern was addressed in the offseason with the pickups that they made. So
yeah, I mean, it could have been addressed better for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I just think that like being a positive believer in a lot of these things, I think that you can see Rice and Carlisle and even like Malik and Mackenzie, I believe, is going to be a much better shooter. Just if you watched him last year, like he was god awful
to start the season,
and then he just got so much better every game. So I imagine if that keeps going. So I think that like between those three people, and then if Malik can hit shots, like if
then you've got Luke Goody, who's a 40% 3-point shooter.
Trey Galloway can play his role and be a slasher who can also knock down threes. Then I think that will be addressed. But that's just if all things go well. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yep. And under the assumption that all things go well, our record prediction, Adam, what do we predict their non-conference record to be?
I mean, we talked about it. None of their games are notable except for Atlantis. And you just like if this team is going to be a top 3, top 4 seed, like you have to. Arizona and Gonzaga are the teams that you have to be able to beat to do that. So I think they have to win their MTE. They have to win Atlantis, and
go ahead.
None of their other games mean anything.
Yeah, and I mean, even to beat the Gonzagas and the Arizonas, they start the season with an exhibition against Tennessee, who is a team of that caliber.
Right.
So that's a game that doesn't matter other than raising money for a good cause.
Right.
And it gives Mike Woodson and the players an idea of, okay, what do we need to do?
Yeah, and I think if they didn't have that game, my answer is probably different.
Yeah. But it gives them a week before the season to adjust, and it gives them several weeks before Atlantis to understand what they need to do to beat those big teams.
Like play that game at Tennessee, and then work on your scheme against these crappy teams, and then go out and win Atlantis. So I think 11-0. I mean, they've got to go 11-0 in the non-con.
Yeah.
And then conference, I don't know. I mean, Purdue's going to be great this year, so they probably split with them. They have that like game. Not at Penn State. It's in
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the arena, but
it's not. I don't remember where it is. I'll find it for you. But I think like it's a trap game.
Yeah, going to Penn State playing Penn State in general is it could go any way. They were a lot better than expected last year. I believe they split with Penn State last year, I think. But we do think they'll split with Penn State again this year. We think they'll lose at Nebraska just because any team going into Nebraska is probably, you could probably chalk that up to a loss because Nebraska just doesn't lose at home.
But the bad man left. The bad man left, Jaren.
The bad man left, but it's also a Fred Hoiberg team. And Hoiberg is a great coach. We do think they'll lose one of the Pacific Northwest games just because the travel out there, 2 games back to back, or not back to back. There's like a couple days in between, but that's just a lot of travel.
You're not going home between.
And that can be tough. Then we do think they lose at Michigan State because
they should be good.
They'll be good, and the Breslin Center is a nightmare for away teams.
Yeah.
Then we think they'll lose one more random conference game.
Yeah.
Right. So, Adam, do the math for me. What would that put their conference record at?
I mean, split with Purdue, split with Penn State, lose Nebraska, lose one out in the Pacific Northwest, lose to Michigan State maybe, or lose a random game. I mean, that's like 6 losses. So 14-6 in the conference.
Not too shabby.
Which they are projected to go 11-9.
Yes.
And finish second. Again, I think that the winner of the Big Ten is going to go 14-6, 15-5. 14-6 at worst.
Yeah.
So 14-6 plus 11 non-con wins, that's 25-6. I think that's good enough for a problem. If they do end up beating Gonzaga and Arizona, that could be a fringe 2 seed, 3 seed, probably a 4 seed though, because their non-con is so terrible.
Yeah, but that doesn't factor in, obviously, if they win the Big Ten tournament. That should bump them up even more. But
correct.
A 4 seed going into the tournament, not too shabby.
Yeah, and maybe they lose 6 games, but they sweep Purdue or win at Michigan State. Like winning at one of these road games would be kind of a thing that pushes you up a seed line. So
yep.
I mean, the Hoosiers, I don't think it's like a make or break season for Mike Woodson. I know that's kind of the thing that people have been talking about is like he's on the hot seat. If he doesn't make the tournament, he's probably not back. I'm not convinced that he won't be back if he doesn't make the tournament, but like this team should absolutely make the tournament.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
maybe, but I think that they'll make the tournament comfortably. We obviously think that they could win the Big Ten. I think that they will be splitting the Big Ten title or winning it outright, and being a top 4 seed. So Hoosiers looking up. You just hope everything breaks your way.
Absolutely. And with that, the clock is showing quadruple zeros, so it's time for us to get out of here. Thanks for checking in on the State of Basketball podcast. We will see you next week. No, this week, right? We'll
see you next time.
We'll see you next time. It's going to be hard to keep track of when these episodes are coming out.
This week. This
yep.
one's going to drop. This is a Monday.
It is Monday. And remember, in 49 states,
it's just basketball.